Welcome back to another edition of Precision's Fly of the Week. Today we're going to tie the classic Stimulator. Hook I got on the vise is a Firehole 718. You can tie these as large as a size 4 if you were trying to mimic salmon flies, and then all the way down to 16. I'm using Semperfli Nano silk. We're going to need thread with a little extra oomph here to cinch down the elk hair. So once you start your thread, take it all the way back to the bend. Take your elk hair, throw it in the stacker so the tips are aligned. So I like to make my tail generally about half the length of the shank of the hook. While squeezing the shank, you need to do a couple loose collecting wraps and then slowly inch your way forward. I'm going to slide my fingers forward, still holding it to the side of the shank, and before I get to, once I get to about the 3/4 point, I'm going to flare the hair. Now I'm going to do tight wraps to lock in the elk hair on top of that shank. Take all the butt ends. You want to trim it at an angle, and then take your thread and cover up as much of that elk as you can. So I'm going to take my thread back up there to about where I stopped with the elk. I'm going to tie my wire. Here I'm using extra small ultra wire. And take it right back to the tail. Next material we're going to tie in is the hackle. Using a size 14 grizzly hackle from our Whiting 100 pack. Stripped off a little bit of the barbs on one side just so that it'll be easier to make that first wrap. A couple tight wraps, make sure that barb is secure. And then for the body color, really the choice is up to you. I'm going to use orange Superfine dubbing. A little bit easier if you add wax or wet your fingers and then just build a tapered noodle with that dubbing. You don't have to add it all at once. If you run out of dubbing while you wrap, come back, add some more. All we're really doing is just adding a little bit of bulk to the body and then covering up the thread wraps. You take your dubbing, cover up all the thread. It's not imperative that all of it gets covered, because once we wind that hackle, any of the thread that's showing through won't really be noticeable. But try your best. This is like one of my favorite patterns to fish alpine lakes. Cutthroat seem to really like the orange. Try it also with the purple body. Worked really well for me out in Colorado. Red also works pretty well too. And then the Smith River float that I did last year, The orange ones really work during the salmon fly hatch. Just a little bit more dubbing. We should be good to go. You can also cheat and use poly floating yarn in place of dubbing. Makes it go a little bit faster. Alright, from here I'm going to throw on a half hitch. I'm going to do that first wrap with that hackle to make sure that it's in the spot that I want it. And then you can either wrap by hand or use the rotary function on your vise. Just wind that hackle forward. With these Norvise automatic bobbins, it makes it really easy whenever you're using a rotary function. You tie off that hackle and then trim off the excess. Throw in another half hitch. Tie off your wire with a couple wraps in front, a couple behind, or vice versa, and then just helicopter it off. You get any hackle barbs that are trapped, now's a good time to go in there and just trim it out. So before I tie in the elk hair, I like to trim a little bit of the hackle up top here, just to give it a little ramp to lie down on. Not imperative. Again, throw some more elk hair into the stacker to align the tips. And then I like to basically measure my wing out to just about halfway at the tail, because once it flares up, it'll sit like that then. Pinch the side of the shank, do 1 to 2 loose collecting wraps, and then flare the hair. And then run your thread through these butt ends to make sure that it's all secure. Come back in here and trim off the excess. Alright, so at this point right here, you got that elk hair tied in, and because you put all that pressure with the thread, it flared it up. And I want my wing to sit down close to the body. So what I do is basically I'll grab a hold of it, I run it back, and then using my thread with just loose wraps, I run it back over the elk hair. Now these are just loose wraps here, they're not tight. And what it does is it pushes that wing down. And then any hair that's basically sitting out of place, you just go in there and just trim. Take your thread and cover up as much of the butt ends as you can. Right there at where the wing sits, you gotta tie in the hackle. Just going to use the remainder of this grizzly from this 100 pack that I started off with. And then we're going to add some dubbing to this thorax. Dubbing not only helps cover up the thread wraps, but it also allows the barbs, it gives the barb something to bite into. Again, I'm not really overly concerned with covering all the thread wraps. With bugs in their natural environment, nothing is ever just really a solid color. There's always some modeling in there, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just going to take the hackle and just wind it forward. Tie it off. And then if you got any hackle barbs that you trapped, you go in there, just trim it off. Then all that's really left is to whip finish. Got one barb right here that's bugging me. We're going to add a dab of the Solarez Bone Dry at the whip finish. Zap with the light. One more hackle barb here. There we go. There it is. Pretty simple to tie. Thanks for watching.